16th Amendment, passed by Congress February 26, 1869, ratified February 3rd, 1870. The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on condition of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. There were a lot of laws across the South that wanted to ban people whose grandfathers hadn't voted from voting. Or you have to pay a poll tax unless your grandfather voted. Or things along those lines. That's where the term grandfathered in comes from. Your grandfather could do it, therefore you can do it. And of course, the people who were affected by these laws, their grandfathers had been slaves.
Their fathers had been slaves. Their fathers had been slaves.
They had been slaves. You know, it's 1869. Everybody had been slaves. So they didn't qualify because they couldn't pay the poll taxes. They couldn't pass the literacy taxes. They couldn't whatever you want to say. And that was, you know, an attempt to get around, no, you have to let black people vote. Black men.
The follow-through, however, isn't that great, however.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is another one where I would argue that the biggest debate about this right now is ex-felons. And of course, you know, the Voting Rights Act. The current Supreme Court believes that voting in this country is fair and is not denied or abridged by race, color, or previous condition of servitude.
Yeah, real fast. A bit later, obviously, but race, color, nothing about sex. However, just
no, we're still allowed to prevent women from voting.
Yeah, I mentioned this in the read this amendment. It said the black people can technically vote. You know, that they about trying to stop them, like with the KKK or the whatever. You know.
Yeah, voter suppression is still very much a thing.
But actively, they can vote.
Legally, the country and the state have to let them vote. In practical terms, there are still enormous barriers to voting in a lot of minority communities.
Yeah, like I think was it 2020 or something. The you can't give out water in the line of thing in Georgia.
Yeah, you can't give water to people standing in line to vote. Voter ID laws actually are disproportionately affecting minority populations because, for example, DMVs get closed in minority communities. And the list of what counts as an ID that you can use to vote is weighted towards white people. I believe it was Texas where you couldn't use a student ID as an ID at the polling place, but you could use a concealed carry permit. And that is bananas. And should be the other way around. And I say this as a person who, while working retail at the Renaissance Fair, has taken library cards, people's membership cards in the medieval organization, because nobody would bother to forge that. It's not a photo ID, but you wouldn't bother to forge it, so I'll accept it. You know, as far as I was there was one guy who tried to show me his ID, and I looked at him and I was like, James, I know your license plate number. And he was like, oh, that's a good point. And to be fair, in that case, it's because I knew him personally. But literally, I knew his license plate number, and that was good enough for me. But voter ID laws are still intended as voter suppression for underprivileged communities. The fact that you have to have a state ID or driver's license and a student ID doesn't count disenfranchises college students, because many of them have not had the time or ability to get over to transfer their state ID from the state where they were born to the state where they now live and are registered to vote, but they do have a student ID. Because of course they do. They give you those. The fact that it costs money to get a driver's license or a state ID card can be disenfranchising. If you can't afford that in your budget, if it's a choice between I can have a valid driver's license or my kids can have shoes, you're going to take the shoes. And I am poor enough so that I can tell you, yes, however little a driver's license costs in your community, that can be the difference between your kids having shoes and your kids not having shoes.
Yeah, and recently, I don't know if it was a federal thing or Ohio thing, but I think a new ID that lets me fly on airplanes now, because a special state ID.
Yeah.
For
I don't have that because you have to go through extra hoops in Washington State to get it, and I haven't done that yet. And we've privatized our DMV here to a ridiculous extent. I have deep feelings on this issue.
Yeah.
Our state doesn't conduct driver's tests anymore. You have to pay a private private driving school to take your driver's test. And that is disenfranchising, because what if you can't afford to do that? When I got my driver's license, I think it was $7 through the state. And I don't think it's $7 to do it now, because you have to go through a private organization. It's now $25 for a learner's permit in Washington State. And it's $72 to get your first driver's license. $100 if you want the enhanced driver's license. And that's without the driving test fee, which varies from location to location. So that is prohibitive for a lot of people. That is just not acceptable.
All men 21 and over can technically vote now.
Yeah, in the United States, as of February 3rd, 1870, all men 21 and over could vote.
But
and
it took almost almost a year, but it less than a year.
Yeah. Hold on. No, you're missing a clause on the slide.
Okay.
Because we have section 2, which is the Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation.
I know if I add that or not. That was important enough to add.
Well, it's where the authority for the Voting Rights Act comes from.
Okay. Sorry, people. We'll fix the editing.
Yeah. It is why Congress is able to pass laws to say, hey, maybe you can't have poll taxes. Maybe you can't have literacy tests. Maybe, whatever. And currently, the Supreme Court held that the most recent version of the Voting Rights Act was unconstitutional on the grounds of being unnecessary, which, funnily enough, the only justice of color who believed that was Clarence Thomas, who, yeah. But it does mean that you, as a citizen, have the right to expect the federal government to protect your right to vote. Whether they do or not, well, that's a different question.
All right. When we return, we will talk about the next big gap between amendments.
Yes.